Hello, everyone. This is Jamar J. Perry, author of the upcoming middle grade fantasy novel, Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms. Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms is about a 12-year-old black boy who learns, after his parent disappears, that they have left him a magical book that has been passed down through the generations of his family. So the biggest inspiration for writing Cameron Battle the way that I did was my own life. When I was growing up, I had a just a really isolated and lonely childhood. I didn't really have that many friends to talk to growing up. And so I really wanted to kind of place a black boy at the center of a fantasy novel because I wanted to showcase how a lonely 12-year-old black boy can grow up to be a hero, right? So in the novel, Cameron Battle learns that not only is he magical, but he also has the power to save an entire kingdom. And through saving this entire kingdom, he learns how to do magic, he learns how to fight. And through it all, he depends on his two best friends, Aliyah and Zion, in order to do that. And so really just, again, really the biggest inspiration for writing this novel and to writing the character the way that I did was my own life. And thinking about, when I was a child, just thinking about some of the things that I wanted to do and some of the things that I wanted to be when I was a child. And so Cameron Battle is just indicative of my childhood. So I always knew I wanted to write in the fantasy genre. Again, growing up, because I was so lonely and because I was so isolated, I love fantasy novels and I love sci-fi novels because it was always a way to how to open up the ordinary into the extraordinary, right? And so because of that, I completely loved everything fantasy. I loved everything magic. I loved everything when people learn that they're special, right? And so because of that, I always want to write in the fantasy genre. I always love sci-fi. I always love fantasy. And I always love to watch fantastical and thrillers and sci-fi movies and television shows because it was just a way to kind of take me out of my norm. It was a way to kind of not think about the past and not think about the present, but the future is always open, right? And so because of that, I love fantasy, and that is what I always want to write in. So when I was a child, there weren't many books with black characters who were main characters, and so that was. I remember thinking when I was a child that that's just how the world was, right? I remember thinking that almost all the novels that I was going to read they would always have white main characters because that's all I saw, right? And so because that was all I saw, I didn't really think that I could write something with a black main character in it. And so there were just a couple of novels that I remember growing up that kind of showcased that. And then the biggest novel that did that was Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. And so that was one of the only novels that I read growing up where a black person and a black character really led a novel. And so because of that, I always thought that, white people was just, that novels was just the domain of white people. And so because of that, it was hard for me to kind of wrap my head around novels that featured me at the center. And so as I grew up and as I went to college, I realized that that wasn't right? And I realized that there needed to be a change. And so I think it's really, really important for black kids to really see themselves in novels because it shows them that they actually can be heroes, right? It shows them that they can be magical. It shows them that they can really become who they need to be. And so if we really show black kids that they can dream and that they can be anything that they want to be, they can grow up and they can think that about themselves. And so I think that's really important for, authors to really showcase diversity. And it's really, not only is it really good to showcase diversity, but it's also good when black authors get the opportunity to actually showcase who they are and also showcase their writing and also showcase characters that look like them in the books that they write. So I think that's really, 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 really important. So I knew that I wanted to be a writer when I was maybe 12 years old. I remember I used to read in the library all the time at recess and at lunch, and sometimes after school. And I remember I used to write just horrible Harry Potter fan fiction. It was pretty terrible, but it really sparked the idea of what it meant to be a writer, and really sparked that fire within me in order to create something tangible for people to read. But it wasn't until college when I read Octavia Butler's Kindred that really showcased a novel where a black woman is the lead of the novel. She's the lead of the novel. In the novel, she ends up going back in time to slavery times, and she realizes that she has to save her ancestors in order for her to be born. And so when I read that novel, it really opened up something within me. I finally saw myself on the page, and I was able to kind of pick up my computer and just start typing and start writing. And so because of that, the idea for Cameron Battle and the Hidden Kingdoms was sprung. So just like how Kindred is a novel about a black woman who becomes a hero and she saves herself, Cameron Battle is kind of like that too. He finds a magical kingdom. He has his best friends with him, and he learns who he is throughout the entire novel, and he becomes a magical hero throughout the novel. So really, this has really been like a 19-year journey. Where I started when I was 12 writing horrible fan fiction to now having a published novel. So, I always wanted to write. My favorite authors are, again, Mildred D. Taylor, the author who wrote Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, Octavia Butler, who I just talked about, who wrote Kindred. Another author that I loved growing up was Christopher Paul Curtis. He wrote The Watsons Go to Birmingham, and he wrote Bucking the Sarge. And so Christopher Paul Curtis is another author that I love because there's so much humor in what he writes, and he does it in such a way that we get to know who these characters are, and we get to really identify with them because he really shows us the human side of these characters, but he also shows the traumatic sides of human existence, right? He talks about Jim Crow. He talks about the Great Depression. He talks about lynching. He talks about racism and discrimination that black people went through during slavery times, during the Great Depression, during Jim Crow, during the Civil Rights Movement as well. So those authors to me are just some of the seminal authors that I love so much, because not only do they have black characters at the core of their novel, but they do it in such a way that we relate to them, right? So they're funny, they're sad, they're happy, there's joy, there's also trauma as well. So these characters are all well-rounded in all these books that I just talked about, but they also have a human side to them too, which I really love. And so the only tip that I have for budding young writers out there is just to kind of do what I did. Read a lot, and write a lot, right? And so a lot of people think that, when you write, immediately you get a book deal. And that's not the case, right? You have to read, and then you have to start writing, and then you have to write some more, right? And so when I was growing up, all I did was just read. And then I read the genres that I loved, that I knew I want to write in. So I knew I want to write in fantasy, and I knew I want to write in sci-fi. So all the novels that I read growing up, the majority of them were fantasy and sci-fi novels, because I knew that later on in life I wanted to write those type of novels, right? And so when I finally started writing, I had kind of a baseline to go with as I started writing. And so when I started writing, I also realized that not only do I have to read in the genre that I wanted to write in, I also realized that I had to write more. And so because of that, once I read a lot and once I wrote a lot, I realized that I had to rewrite a lot, and I realized I had to revise a lot. And then I realized that I had to get people that I trusted to read my writing in order to tell me how to get better, right? And so in order to be a good writer, for my opinion, number one, read in a genre that you want to write in the genre that you want to write in, and then revise all the time until you get a finished novel. So yeah. That's what I think that you should do if you want to be a writer in this industry.